Okay, this is the second part of the lecture on 28th of October. We continue to see the classification of the equilibrium points of stationary points. And here we started so-called in Italian fuoco, caso del fuoco, when the coefficient A is 0. So let us start with eventual questions. If you have some questions connected with this calculation, let us wait for a while when other participants.
Professor, can you explain again why did we cancel epsilon2?
Only for simplicity, to have smaller, simpler calculation. You see, if this is our curve, this is the solution, I can start, for example, from here or from here. In both cases, my trajectory is the same. Why? Because the Cauchy theorem says, starting from a point, you have one curve. You cannot intersect two curves. So if I start from another point of the circle, where epsilon20 is not 0, I again shall have geometrically the same curve, but my calculations should be much more complicated. Therefore, I, for simplicity, have taken this choice in order to have simpler calculations. And finally, the curve, once we find, is the same. Of course, if you put epsilon20, you have to make more calculations, but since our course is not to make very sophisticated theory, I choose for simplicity this initial point. Actually, you can see that for the same curve, if I start from here, my calculations are similar. In this case, epsilon10 shall be 0. But finally, the curve shall be the same, because Cauchy theorem says, if my curve from here comes here, then I can take this initial data, and again, Cauchy theorem says this is the same curve. Therefore, for simplicity, when we already found the curve, I would suggest you all the time to start from point of one of the axes to have simpler calculations if you need calculations. Otherwise, you simply apply our theory that says if A is 0 and you have pure imaginary eigenvalue, then your curves are closed curves and you have focus.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, simplicity. This is very important argument that is very often used in all physical math physics models. They're also always connected. What is the simplest case we can consider? What is the simplest assumption that can simplify our calculations? Okay. Other questions?
I'm sorry, can you please repeat how do you recognize the real part from the imaginary one?
You mean here?
Yes, please.
Yes. You can see once we decided that this guy disappears, because we take this to be 0, I shall clean it. And what we have here is expression from which we have to find real and imaginary part. Have in mind that this is real. Why? Because A is real. So this guy is real. Epsilon10 is real. So whenever you have a real number, and if you multiply by, for example, x1 plus x2, when you open the brackets, you can recognize very easy real and imaginary part, because this is your real number multiplied by x1, this is real, plus your real number multiplied by x2 with e. Therefore, when you have in front a real number, this is your real part, and this here is your imaginary part, because your I is kept here. So imaginary part is the same. You take x2 multiplied by the number. This shall be the imaginary part. If you take x1 and multiply by this real number, this shall be your real part. Therefore, when you have a real number multiplied by complex number, the real part of this expression is simply our real number multiplied by the real part of our complex number. This is,
okay. Thank you.
we can generalize this saying, if you have a real number and if you have zeta complex number, then its real part shall be our real number, this guy, multiplied by the real part of zeta. This is very simple rule. When you have real numbers, real part is very simple. The real number multiplied by the real part of zeta.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions. I think these are important questions because they show that we need a little bit more practice to work with complex numbers, because this is probably the first time you start to work with them. So this is quite natural to try to make some examples and understand them better. Other questions for the moment? I cannot see. Then we can go to the case, for example, a smaller than 0. Because here the situation is quite simple again. Because if we want to consider case A negative, first of all, I shall clean this part. Then I have to clean also the picture, because something has to be modified in my picture. And of course, here I have to modify this has to be modified, but first of all, we said A now shall be negative. We have 3 cases, A0, A negative, A positive. So, A negative. Actually, this means something very simple. This coefficient is not 0, not 1. So, when t is increasing, since A is negative, A to the minus it goes to 0 exponentially, very rapidly. When t goes to infinity, this goes very fast to 0. So this decreases. It's kind of dissipative, kind of decreasing function. What changes? This coefficient is the same here and here. Therefore, if you take the sum of the squares, epsilon1 square plus epsilon2 square, I have to add here this factor, because before, when a was 0, this was 1. Now it's not 0, so I have simply to take a to the power at to the power 2, because we take squares. In the left, I took the squares. Therefore, you can see immediately that what is epsilon1 square plus epsilon2 square? If we start, for example, with this point, which is epsilon1, 0, and the second coordinate is 0. What is the meaning of, if I take here epsilon1t, epsilon2t? We know that the sum of the squares due to Pythagorean theorem, this is the square of the distance between this point and the origin. So what we put here, epsilon1 square plus epsilon2 square, is the square of the distance to the origin. What you can say, the distance increases or decreases with time going to plus infinity. Look at this factor. This is a to the power, if you don't like the square, it is a to the power 2at. A is negative, so this factor is again decreasing. And this means if I start with a radius, for example, this one, the radius shall diminish, the distance has to diminish, and therefore I shall have something like this, not of course, sum of the squares still remains, but our curve starts to make spiral, and now with your help, I shall build the arrows. What will happen with our curve when t goes to plus infinity? This is smaller and smaller. So what is the correct direction? This one or opposite? Therefore, direzione oraria o antioraria? Deve essere antioraria. Therefore, we need this. And you see, with this choice, you can say immediately because again, this is focus, a fuoco, but stable or unstable. You can decide immediately. This is very stable, focus. So we have focus, but stable. And stability is very important. And you see the role of our parameter A. If A is 0, we have circles. If A is negative, we have a spiral that is approaching 0. It is stable, stationary point. And I think now you can very easy build the picture when A is positive. What will happen with our spiral? Instead of approaching 0, the spiral shall escape from 0, shall go away, and therefore you have the same picture, but you have to invert the arrows. And therefore, I shall put here on the right-hand side, shall clean this part and shall make the picture with A positive. We set A positive. When A is positive, oh, my 0 is very bad. This is correct 0. So we said again, we have kind of, you see what I did, starting from my point. Now, if A is positive, this is increasing functions, therefore the radius shall be bigger and bigger. And you see now my picture is spiral that is escaping, going far, far away from the origin, and we have focus but unstable. This is practically the whole classification that is necessary for our models. And what we have to do is to take some of our models, find stationary point, make Taylor expansion, and then see what will happen without repeating all these calculations that I've done today. You have to find, after Taylor expansion, you have to do one thing, define eigenvalues. And according to your eigenvalues, you can build the picture around your stationary point. So I would propose, first, of course, some your questions, and then Lotka-Volterra to see what will happen. Lotka-Volterra, what is stationary point, and what is the behavior close to stationary point. Remember, Lotka-Volterra was the key model in oncology. Therefore, one can immediately start to make some connections with our modeling process, and it's really nice to have direct connection. And in this way, I am sure that if you participate in a team in which you have physicists, mathematicians, you can already have some basis to understand what will happen, because typically the models are much more complicated. But if you know the basic models, the basic ideas, then you can have better interaction with your colleagues. So, Lotka-Volterra. But before your questions, let me see if you have some questions to clarify from the blackboard or from what we said. I think, again, since our principle is not to move very fast, even if we start Lotka-Volterra and leave the end, because today I promised to finish 10 minutes earlier, we can start and then we can finish eventually it later on. But for Lotka-Volterra, probably I need your help. Can you remember Lotka-Volterra, if you have some trace of what we did? Because in my lectures, this part I didn't print. Can you help me with Lotka-Volterra system that was 2 by 2?
Il sistema x' uguale x moltiplicato per 1 meno y.
This is sufficient. This is what I need from the beginning. Thank you for your help. Let us go to Lotka-Volterra and see what we have in the stationary point. Probably we can compare the situation with one predatore, lupo grigio e uomo. Between the human beings and the wolves, who is predator, who is predatory? Because it seems after the Second World War in Italy, the wolf disappeared almost completely. Now the wolf is protected by the law, so it is forbidden to kill the wolves. But somehow it is not clear who is predator, who is predatory. Okay, so I shall start with Lotka-Volterra, and keeping our notations, we started with U1 prime. This was, you tell me U1, 1 minus U2. Something like this, because okay, U2 prime, this shall be minus U2, 1 minus U1. Is it correct, this version of Lotka-Volterra?
Yes.
this is okay. So we said that always U1 and U2 from our model should be positive quantities, because we expect that U1, U2 are connected with number of are some positive numbers measuring number of population, and that's why we are interested only in the positive solutions. So if we start U1, U2, and if we look for stationary points or a punti di equilibrio, we assume that both U1 and U2 are positive. Now, what is stationary point? We have to solve U1, 1 minus U2 equals 0, and U2, 1 minus U1 equals 0. To find stationary points, it is clear if we look for positive U1 and U2, the only possibility is U2 equal 1, U1 equal 1. So we can say from here, 1, 1 is stationary point. And we have to look what is the behavior close to this stationary point, that is 1, 1. We promised to make Taylor expansion of our functions appearing in the right-hand side close to this point. Therefore, I shall remind you the Taylor formula, because here we have f1. This shall be our function f2. And here, let me keep this part of the whiteboard for f1 of u. Of course, u is the couple u1, u2. We already know that we work with vectors, and u is the couple u1, u2. So this was, according to Taylor expansion, f1 in the point 1, 1. But we already know that in the point 1, 1, this should be 0, because this is stationary point, plus next term is some coefficient times u1 minus 1 plus another coefficient u2 minus 1. What is in front of this coefficient? We have u1, therefore we have to take the derivative of f1 with respect to which variable? First, u1, because here we have u1. So you have to take d of u1 of f1. You compute this, and then you substitute with the point 1, 1. Here, if you have here u2 minus the point, the second coordinate of the stationary point, then we have to take the u2 of f1, 1, 1. And the remaining part is garbage. We shall simply shall cancel. The remainder shall be avoided. But we have to compute for our function. And we start now. Since I need a little bit space, I shall clean this part. And we can finish our derivative, how we shall compute. So we need to compute partial derivative with respect to u1 du1 f in the point 1, 1. So this is the function f1. What we are doing, if you look for partial derivative with respect to u1, you consider u2 constant, free parameter. If this is constant, what is the derivative of the function u1? This is the u1 when you take derivative. If you have x, derivative of x is 1. Therefore, derivative of u1 shall be exactly 1 times this constant. So this shall be 1 minus u2. This is your partial derivative. And then what is said, we have to substitute u2 with which value? This shall be 1, 1. We have to take u2 equal 1. First we differentiate and then we substitute. And this, of course, when you take u2 equal 1 in this expression, what is the result? Identically 0. So this derivative is 0. Let us compute the second term, partial derivative with respect to u2. What will happen? Derivative with respect to u2 of the function f1. In general, first we make partial derivative for any u1, u2. How you make partial derivative with respect to u2? You consider u1 constant, and then you differentiate the function 1 minus u2. 1 minus u2, what is the derivative with respect to u2? Derivative is minus 1. This is a constant because we don't touch u1, so our result shall be minus u1. Again, minus comes from the derivative of this function, that is like x. If you have minus x, the derivative is minus 1. So you have minus from here, and this, we said, is not touched. This is free parameter, and it's remaining. Once you compute this partial derivative, you have to take u1 equal 1 and u2 equal 1. This vertical line means first you compute your function and then you substitute with 1, 1. Now we have to substitute here because this is generic u1, u2. Now we have to substitute u1 with 1. What is the result? Final result shall be minus 1. So this is our partial derivative. I know very well that probably this is partial derivatives we didn't practice, so we need a little bit practice with these partial derivatives. Let us try to do similar thing. So now we make Taylor expansion for function f1. f1 of u, or if you prefer u1, u2, is what? We apply the Taylor expansion. The first guy is 0, because this is stationary point. And here we take 0, so there is no u1 minus 1. What we have is u2 minus 1, but coefficient in front is minus 1. So this is minus u2 minus 1. And this is our Taylor expansion. Here, plus r. This remainder we shall, after this, neglect. So here we have also r. Let us stop for the moment, and can you see on the blackboard if you have some questions? We can stop and wait for your questions before going further, because this is very important point, Taylor expansion. After this shall be very easy because the matrix is simple, eigenvalues are simple, and we can conclude very easy the last part. But Taylor expansion is something that needs these partial derivatives. If you have partial derivative with respect to u1, first you consider generic function depending on u1 and u2. Partial derivative with respect to u1 means u2 is fixed parameter, and you consider function of u1 and differentiate using the table of derivatives. Here the function is simple, u1. The derivative of u1 is 1. What remains? 1 minus u2. And I have to substitute this vertical line, means after the calculation, in which I have expressions with u1, u2, I have to substitute, as it is written in Taylor expansion, have to substitute u1 with 1, u2 with 1. And this vertical line is exactly this substitution. To know that first we differentiate, have generic expression, and then we substitute, and substituting we get 0 in the first case. In the second case, after the substitution, we get this coefficient minus 1. I think for F2, you can try to do the same calculation. So I shall put here the same formula, only 1 is replaced by 2. U1, F2, U2, F2. And I would ask you to propose what I have to write in the right-hand side. Please to try by yourself, and then we shall do this together with you. Take F2, that is written on the right-hand side, of U2 prime, and try to find the Taylor expansion. Let us see how you can proceed. I shall leave you a few minutes. Probably D U1 F2 in 1 1 is necessary, and D U2 F2 in 1 1. Actually, I shall be happy if you say me what is this and what is this, because after this it is quite simple. Please to compute partial derivative of F2 with respect to U1 in the point 1 1. What is the number you get? Let's see. If somebody is ready, can send by chat some answer, and I can also follow. If you have some proposal, please to tell me. Yes?
I got 1 for the first.
This is 1. Perfect.
0.
Oh, perfect. We have very nice new. Your name? Martina. Martina is, you are presented here. Martina already found the correct answer. And I can repeat that when you take this function, the derivative with respect to u1 is u2, because you have minus minus, this shall be plus u1, u2. u2 is a constant, so you have to take derivative of this guy. Derivative of this guy only is minus 1. Minus 1 by minus plus u2. The partial derivative is u2, and when you substitute u2 with 1, the result is 1. This is the result, and similar is the calculation here. So we can say that now we shall have, in this case, we need u1 minus 1 with coefficient 1. This shall be u1 minus 1 plus another remainder. So our Taylor expansion is ready. Now we have to switch from u to epsilon1, epsilon2. Remember that for epsilon1, we have to take u1 minus 1. Our substitution passing to epsilon1 and epsilon2 was u1 minus the stationary point. So minus 1. Epsilon2 in our previous lectures was u2 minus the second coordinate of the stationary point. And now we can go to our equation and write, as we have written during our lecture, epsilon prime, epsilon1 prime is f1, but f1 in epsilon is minus epsilon2. I am looking at my Taylor expansion, substitute epsilon2 minus 1 with epsilon2 with sign minus, and I put here. This is from this Taylor expansion. I have this right-hand side. Similarly, f2 is needed for epsilon2. Epsilon2 prime shall be u1 minus 1, but u1 minus 1 is epsilon1. Therefore, we have epsilon1. Actually, this system was our example that we studied yesterday. This is exactly the case that we studied before the break with A equals 0. And now you can say immediately, what is your stationary point? We have several possibilities to say this is saddle point, this is knot, or this is focus. Of course, if we have our previous example before, it is focus. And our circles, in this case, have been built for the case A equals 0. So what we can say, the picture is the following. We need to build the picture, so I shall use this. Close, we have focus of this type. This is the behavior of the, this is epsilon1, epsilon2. The behavior of our Lotka-Volterra system close to stationary point, we have kind of, in any case, if you start from close to the stationary point, you still remain close. You don't go to the point, but you're close, the distance is not going to infinity. Therefore, we can say that still you have kind of stability of Lotka-Volterra because your trajectory is a circle. So we have focus. It is sufficient to build this picture and you know what is the behavior of your system. Okay, since I promised to finish earlier, I think to stop here and leave for the next our appointments other examples with different models, especially practicing the Taylor expansion. This is very important. After finding stationary point, you have to find also Taylor expansion and really find this simplified linear system for which you find eigenvalues. Here, eigenvalues have been plus minus I. Complex number, you have focus. And you build immediately the picture. So with this, I stop the registration. And the next time we shall start with a little bit, shall extend with more exercises and some examples of Taylor expansion. Okay. Let me stop the registration.